Welcome to We Don't Have Cookies with your host, Jason Marshall.
Hey everybody, thanks for downloading the show. My guest today is a touring, headlining comedian who has been on Good Morning America and The View, among other things. It's the one and only Sonya King. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you today?
I'm doing great. You started doing comedy after entering a local comedy contest in 1999. Do you remember any of the jokes that you did that night?
Oh my gosh. I think I did one that my name is Sonya. Backwards, that's anus. I think so.
At this point in your career, I know looking back on earlier sets is sometimes embarrassing. Is there any jokes that you think you could ever carry over? And I think by the fact that you don't really remember them, I think that kind of answers the question. Because clearly they have not.
They have died and been buried. Yeah. Gone through a lot of transitions since then. So, yeah. But what I like to see other people do, and I like it so much when I see it that I thought, you know what, that's something that I feel like is real important, is that as your life changes, your material changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's not applicable anymore. If it's not going on in your life, if it's not relevant, then, you know, an audience is going to know that.
That's a very good point, because some people think it's a cliche, but they say write what you know. And you're right. If your life changes, that just kind of changes your mindset and where you go with things.
Absolutely. 2
years into doing stand-up, did you ever think that you would someday be performing on The View?
No. Well, I never thought. I never knew. Didn't know what The View was. So that's one reason why.
That would be very hard to picture yourself on a show you'd never heard of. That's right. A fair point.
That's right. But I felt like that anything was possible. Maybe in the beginning, there was some grandiose ideas of what this could be like and what it would become.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went along, what I found is that for me personally, it's to be happy with what it is that I'm doing. And for me, it was that balance of home life and getting on stage every chance that I could. That balance was more important to me than going for every single opportunity that came up or taking every single gig that was available, because, I would go and do a gig, they would give me a hotel, and then I'd come home because the kids would have soccer games or whatever on Saturday mornings. So I'd come home Friday after a gig, so I'd be there for them, and then I would drive back to the gig Saturday night.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened quite a bit. And, it's a little bit different because my son is autistic, and, I had to tailor my schedule around his needs. So, it was pretty clear that in the beginning it was very tough for me to even think about staying overnight someplace, because I knew his routine so well every morning and exactly what he needed. And it would be stressful for not only him, but for his dad and he would do it. His dad would do it. He's an awesome guy. But it's just easier if I was there. So just kind of made those decisions.
And that had to be kind of a difficult balance, because I don't think most people realize this, but comedians don't just show up and go on stage and then come down and leave. You usually stick around and watch the other people's sets. There's writing involved, and
right.
Just what goes on with your set and performing is time consuming enough. That's why a lot of times comedy is more for a single person, because they have all the time in the world. They can just pack up and go. But when you have a family, especially one with somebody who's autistic and they're used to routines, that had to be very difficult to split your time that way.
It's funny because one time I asked my daughter, I said, what was it like having a brother that's autistic? And she said, well, I don't know any different. So I have nothing to compare it to. So I guess in that regard, it's the same thing with me, is that I don't have anything to compare it to. So it's always the way that it's been, and it worked out.
Well, you won a Carnival Cruise comedy competition, which led to you doing a lot of work on cruise ships. Was that hard for you, knowing how much you're involved with your family and being there for them?
Yes, I did maybe half a dozen runs with them, and then I quit because it was just too hard being impossible to get back home if need be. So I quit doing those because of that.
I'll take this part out of the show, but I'm a very family-oriented guy, so I got to really commend you on that. That's really good. I think a lot of people, especially once they see that they're getting somewhere in their career, they tend to have that, I'm going for this, and my family can just be along for the ride or something. So I think that's great that you put them first like that. That's the way it should be, and I think that's awesome.
You know what? I think you should keep that part in, because that's something that's it's who you are. Some people are like that, and some people are extremely motivated career-wise, and people find their own balance and what fills them up. I guess that's the key, right? Is to find the balance in the things that you love. For me, stand-up was really, it saved me because I got to go do this thing and share the nonsense that was in my head. And it was really awesome because it was like my therapy.
Yeah.
You know, so I would deal with my son and all the issues that come with autism. And then I would be able to go off and just drive a couple hours and get on stage. And for me, that was something that probably saved my sanity. Yeah.
I can see that, because some people, just driving for a couple hours is therapy, but then you get on stage and you do that, and especially if it goes well. If you bomb,
Right.
it's a hard couple hours back.
It is, but you know what? Like how you just said that it's, you know, might be some easier for somebody that's single. If I bomb, it's easier for me because when I'm driving home, I'm like, well, at least I got this.
We're going to take a hard right turn. I want to ask you, how did you learn to play the banjo?
Oh my gosh. I had been told forever that I would never get paid for singing. And so this,
that's a very nice thing to be told.
Right. It happened often. So we were living up in Pennsylvania, and this music store in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania was having this trade event. So you could take instruments that you had, take them in, and they would trade you for something. I had a clarinet. My husband had a saxophone. So I took those down to this trade, and I just knew that I had to get a banjo. I didn't know why. It was just one of those things that I knew that this was going to be a bit that was just a killer bit, and it was going to be one that I needed to do. So I traded them in, and I got this book, and I learned to play 3 chords. So I practiced the 3 chords. I practiced picking so I could learn how to do that. And then I just wrote this really stupid song. And basically in the beginning was just like, all you people that said I'd never get paid for singing, well, here's a giant F you. And, you know, and I went and I did it, and it just became something that was so fun, and it ultimately ended up being my closer.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Feel free to say no, especially now that you said it was your closer. But do you mind singing that song?
Oh, I can't. Oh, I don't even have the banjo here with me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tucked away. It's tucked away in the other room in a closet. So what happened was that was my closer for a long time, and the song is just about it's called Ambulance Driver, and it was about all the crazy things that happen. And then, like, the chorus that the audience goes along with me on is just woo, like that. So it's just really stupid. But anyway, so it was, like I said, it was my closer. And then I started feeling like, okay, I'm kind of tired of dragging this around with me, and it feels like it's kind of like a security blanket. So in order to challenge myself, what if I got rid of my closer?
Ooh.
Like, what would that, you know? And so I was like, okay, I just have to do it. I don't know what's going to happen. It was my security blanket, because if it was a good show, that kind of elevated the end. And if it was a bad show, it kind of sometimes saved me. And then other times, of course, when people hated me from the very beginning, it was like torture, just having to stand up there and, do this thing that I was told I could never do well, and then just do it in front of people that hated me anyway. But anyway, my point is that I kind of outgrew it because that point had been served. And then I really wanted to stretch as a performer. So if I got rid of my closer, I really had to work hard to build material in a direction so that I could still close on the highest elevation here. Like you want to go up on your way out.
Yeah. So what was the process there? Did you just rework an existing joke, or did you come with something altogether new?
Both. And I rearranged my set entirely and took a bit that was consistently killing every time and made that, the last thing that I said. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised that everything was okay. And it was really scary at first because I didn't know. It had been so long that I thought, I don't know how to do this. And I felt so awkward to not have it. And then when I started doing shows without it and it was working, I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. And I don't have to lug a banjo around everywhere. That was the hardest thing, is that flying was a pain in the rear end, lugging a banjo everywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
Especially when it was just like the last 5 minutes of my show.
Yeah, that's a lot of trouble to go through for 5 minutes of a show.
Yeah. Right. I would be happy to do the song for you. I don't have it with me.
Well, you have your own podcast called Josh Has Autism. You do that podcast with your son, who you referred to earlier. What can people expect to hear when they check that out?
A friend of mine recently told me this. She came away from it feeling, which I love the way she explained this, how she interpreted this, is that it's like a book, and Josh is the author, and I'm just kind of interviewing the author. I'm kind of like pulling that information out, pulling that story out of him by the questions that I'm asking. But the podcast is about him. It's about how he processes, how he moves through situations, how he's grown into an adult, and how that's different now for him versus growing up, the benefits, the supports that were in place, when he was growing up, and how they, disappeared when he got out of high school, and anything and everything. Every week I just come up with an idea that I'm interested in from him, and I learn a lot of stuff, and I hope that the listeners learn a lot of stuff too. I mean, I'm thinking, I know this kid better than anyone knows him, and I'm finding out things every single time that I didn't know.
That's great. I think everybody should check that out. I'll have a link to your website and to the podcast in the show notes. I encourage everybody to take a listen to that. It sounds really, really good. I'm sure people will like it. Sonya is also an animal communicator. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Sonya will be interviewing my cat. Stay tuned.
My cat is stupid, but that's okay. Doesn't need a brain anyway. He eats and sleeps and sniffs the floor. Spends hours scratching at the door. Thinks plastic bags are lots of fun. Falls off the shelf licking his bum. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. Meow, 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 meow. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. A cerebellum's useless stuff. He's better off having more fluff in the survival of the cutest. It sure does help to be clueless. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. Meow, 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 meow. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. In fact, he's so highly evolved. He's happy staring at a wall. Look in the eyes upon his face. Glimpse the emptiness of space. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. My cat is stupid, but that's okay. He doesn't need a brain anyway. My cat cat is stupid, that's okay. Doesn't need a brain anyway. My cat is stupid, that's okay. And he's got a better life than me.
Want to contact the show? Send an email to jason@wedon'thavecookies.com or call 929-266-9342 and leave a voicemail.
I'm back with my guest comedian, Sonya King. When was the first time you realized that you could understand what animals were saying? Were you bitten by a radioactive spider, or did you get hit on your head and you see birds circling like in the cartoons, but instead of chirping, they were speaking to you?
Well, sort of. Sort of. Well, it was on an accident. I had got a head injury, and after that, I realized that I should stop keeping myself from being open with the fact that I can hear what animals are saying. So initially, we go back a little bit further from, when I was younger, and I could hear them, but I didn't know that other people didn't hear what I'm hearing the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I heard them and I had my relationship with them and would interact with them, and never knowing that other people didn't, for example, hear them say that they needed something or wanted something. I just thought everybody else, that's what they were hearing. Then as an adult, when I was in the accident, I think part of it, there was a clarity that took place. And also part of that was that I realized that why am I holding back on this? Why am I not willing to help people if I can help people? I don't advertise to do this. So I just figure people that are meant to come together and have this experience, then they somehow or another, they find me, they contact me, and we do it. I don't do advertising or anything like that. It's part of my life with the stand-up and with the speaking that I do about autism. Again, remember earlier we were talking about how stand-up was my refuge away from the daily efforts of raising an autistic son. Well, now the animal communication is something that fills me up in a different way than the stand-up or the speaking does. It's very, very important to me. But it's also something that I feel like I like to be organic. Like if somebody's looking for a way to communicate with their animal and they somehow find their way to me,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like that's great. Then this is that we're meant to be together in this experience, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity.
Have you ever talked to an animal that was just completely full of crap, like a Chihuahua trying to convince you that he was in the movie Die Hard or something like that?
That's hysterical. You've had a run-in with a Chihuahua, haven't you? No, but some of them are characters. I mean, some of them are so funny, and they do things to be smart aleck sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they know they're not supposed to do something, but it's kind of, they interpret it as a fun race. Like our friend Karen and her dog Courage, he knows he's not supposed to grab the chicken off the street. He knows that. And yet when he sees it, it's like game on. So let's see who's moving faster today, Mom.
Are there any animals that have had personalities that have just surprised you? Like, for example, I used to have a pet snake. A friend of mine tried to pull a prank on me when we were camping and put the snake in my tent. And when I woke up, I found the snake, and instead of screaming and being scared, I took it home and it was my pet. And
oh, wow.
It was about the size of a pencil, and it was very, very skinny. So it wasn't a snake you should be afraid of anyway, but I would put him in my hand and he would just roll and flip around. And I never thought that a snake would have a playful personality, if you will. Is there any animals out there that you've communicated with where you were kind of surprised that that's the main characteristic in those particular animals?
I was at a barn because I was talking to some horses, and this goat ran by, and the goat looks over and he goes, "I live here." I'm like, okay. and then I go to the lady, I was like, "Who's that?" She goes, "Oh, that's the goat. He lives here." Oh, okay.
He just said that.
Yeah, he just said that. Yeah.
Do you go to many farms and places like that? Because I would say your experience in those kind of environments has to be drastically different than my experience or somebody else's. Say, like you went to a zoo or something like that. Again, that would have to be a pretty interesting place to go with you.
I haven't been to the zoo in a very long time because I have a hard time when animals are not treated well.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is one of the hardest things. And then yet every single time, I mean, the animals understand while they're here, and they're all here. They choose to be here, and they're here to help to move us forward in our mindset and spiritually, just in understanding in general. So whether it's your family pet or it's a wild animal or one that's in captivity, they always have something to teach us. And with their energy, they can help us to move beyond where we're stuck, because that's why they're here.
I think at the zoo, too, the conversations would have to get redundant because pretty much all of them are, "Hey, can you go over there and open that door?" After hearing that about 70 times, you're ready to go.
Yeah. You would think so, but I would bet you that there are some that would turn it around and say, "Okay, I'm here. Why aren't you opening the door and walking through and doing the things that you're meant to do?" They're pretty profound.
I went to the zoo, it was about a year or two ago with my daughter. And one thing that really, really surprised me, we walked by a cage with a ton of tigers in it, and they had a dog in the cage with the tigers, and he seemed fine. They seemed cool with it. Apparently, if somebody jumps over and gets in, the dog alerts people or something. I think you could probably just have a guy watch for that, but it just seemed like a bad idea.
There was a show on a while ago called Dogs with Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not on anymore, but it's like this dog should have been on that show.
Oh, yeah.
Because like I wonder how that interview process went. How would you like to be with a whole den of wild animals that could kill you in a second? That's when a Chihuahua would be okay. Because those huge attitude. I can do it.
It would have to be like being at a guard at a maximum security prison, and you're the only guard. Completely unarmed. You just hope they listen.
Right. Oh, that's hysterical. That's right.
Well, I said that we were going to talk to my cat. His name, for those of you who are listening for the first time, is Mr. Kitty. I know that's kind of a generic name. I've said this before, but when we first found the cat, I wasn't a cat person. I always preferred dogs. My wife and kids always wanted a cat. I always shot it down. So when I saw this cat, I thought if I give it a name, we're going to get attached to it. So if I call it Mr. Kitty, it can run around the neighborhood and I'll never have to worry about it. And of all people, I ended up getting attached to it. And now he's our cat. So much so, when we started to remodel the house that we're living in now, longtime listeners know how long of a process that was. I built him his own room underneath the stairs. So he's a big part of the family now.
That is cool.
How do we get into the process of this? I've never done anything like this before. Is there something specific I need to do?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is just ask you just a couple questions, get the energy flowing.
Okay.
I asked you earlier to send me a picture, and you did that before we got on a phone call. He did share some information with me. So just to invite him into this, let me just ask you a couple questions. How old is he?
He's 2 years old.
And how long have you had him?
2 years. Because when we found him, he was just a kitten. My youngest daughter's the one that found him, and she just fell in love. And I was trying to not have a cat.
Well, Mr. Kitty had other plans.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Okay, so remember how I was talking about in the zoo, how what you think might be a typical conversation is very different because an animal operates on the spirit level all the time. So they understand purpose. They understand the motivation for people, how they work, how they're trying to get from point A to point B. So it's not an accident that he came to live with you. It was by design. It was by plan. Everybody's better off that he's there than you would have been if he wasn't there.
Oh, yeah.
So he knows that his purpose is to be there, bringing balance into the home too. Because there's a vibration, and he's able to, everything is a vibration. That's how animal communication works, is that it's just picking up on that particular vibration. But there's a couple of things that he says right off the bat. First of all, he says that his house is very busy and loud.
Yeah, I can see that.
I didn't know, before we started talking today, I didn't know that if you were married. I didn't know what the situation was. But when I check in with him, he shared something with me. So the question is...
Please don't tell me my wife's cheating on me.
No, but who has...
I thought maybe he saw something I didn't know about.
If he's... I can tell you this much. If he had said that, I would not say that on your podcast. I would go on somebody else's podcast and say, "Oh, hey." No, that would be messed up. That would be messed up.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but has anything like that ever happened?
No, because here's why. They are not in the business of embarrassing their people.
Mm-hmm.
So they will share information, and I don't even really know what it is that they're talking about, but I've learned through the years that I don't question it, I just pass it on.
Okay.
So sometimes it doesn't make any sense to me, but if I hold back because it doesn't make any sense to me, then the person might be missing out on something that's really important for them at that time in their life. So who is it that has shorter brown hair?
That's my wife.
Okay. She's very, very important to the family cohesiveness. So again, I was thinking that was probably your wife or your partner. Mr. Kitty's bringing her up because, he's just saying, "Hey, I know who we're talking about. I know what we're doing here." So he's just bringing her into it as well. So like this loud, very busy house includes her.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So you just called your wife a big mouth on air. You're in trouble. Those are the things that he shared with me. Basically, he wanted to say, "Hey, this is my family. They're big and they're loud and they're noisy. And there's this one that's got short brown hair, and she's part of the noise too. And he's happy there. He's very happy. He's very busy."
Getting into the noise and the busyness, I have a question. Is he happy or annoyed with my youngest daughter always carrying him around? Because I think he's annoyed, but on the other hand, sometimes he seems very happy. So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Sometimes he's annoyed because she can be a little klutzy.
Yeah.
And when that happens, he's uncomfortable because he's like, "Whoa," and doesn't know where they're going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's fine. She approaches him and comes to him in a place of bliss.
Yeah.
It's just, she's just so joyful, and she really, really loves him. And what he likes too is that she'll sing. and he really likes it when she sings.
That must be why he's so happy, because she sings all day long.
Yeah.
My other question, you know, I'm going to change this other question up. My last question for you is, this is very odd. This is why I need to get an answer. Every time I blow my nose, he desperately wants to smell the tissue. Why is that?
Wow. Okay. Are you on any medication?
No, I probably should be, but I'm not.
Because there's something about this. It's the chemical makeup of it that made me question that, because it's curious to him. It doesn't feel like he wants to do anything with it. It's not like he wants to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
He's very curious about it. It gets his attention because it's very distinct. So are you on vitamins or anything? You don't take anything?
No, but every time I get a Kleenex and I blow my nose, he comes up and he reaches up to try to smell the Kleenex. And I've never seen any other animal want to do that before. It's not something I taught him, so I don't know why he's doing it.
That would be a very weird thing to teach him. If you did, I'm pretty sure, yep, you need to be on medication. The reason I ask you about the medication is because it's different. I'm going to have to...
Well, to be fair, most people who've talked to me for over 20 or 30 minutes have asked me if I'm on medication. So I'm used to that question.
Something about that, it's like there's boy, how do I find the words to explain this? Sometimes they show me things that are abstract, so to find the words to match can be difficult. So know that they're not, this is a very good question that you brought up, and it's important. He's letting you know you got to take care of yourself. You know, sometimes as parents, we don't always take care of ourselves the way that we should because we're so busy taking care of everybody else. And it's easy for us to just push things aside and not, really worry too much about it. But, it sounds like it really warrants a visit to see somebody about this. And also, I don't believe in accidents. You and I are talking today, and Mr. Kitty is saying, hey, something is going on in there. And I know that you asked the question, but it's by design that he's doing this thing to get your attention.
Yeah, because he doesn't really do that with anybody else in the house, so it just seemed kind of very peculiar.
Yeah. So he's letting you know that something is going on, so take care of yourself.
I heard you on the Karen and Kira Can Read podcast. You were using Karen's dog Courage to get information about a ghost in Kira's house. I have a lot of paranormal things around my house. Even some of my guests have witnessed them. I've actually talked about that on a couple of episodes now. Is that something that we could do sometime down the line?
I'm totally up to it. Yeah. I think that would be pretty cool.
Great. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to that. Sonya, I really want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we go?
Maybe just one more time that I have a podcast to do with my son called Josh Has Autism. If they want to visit my website, sonyaking.com, anybody that's interested in that, you can let me know what you'd like to hear Josh and I talk about. And I think that's it.
All right. Sounds good. That's it for this episode. If you haven't already, like the podcast Facebook page, facebook.com/we don't have cookies, and keep spreading the word about the podcast. It's the only way the show can grow. Next week, I'll be joined by UFC Hall of Famer Dan the Beast Severn and late night cable movie queen Rebecca Love. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening. Tell your friends about the show and leave a review. See you next time.
Are you on any medication?